Now, before I jump in, I should mention this is not a full review of Day 8. So if you want a really good, in-depth review of Day 8, I suggest that you hop over to Hidden True Crime. And Lauren has been going live on a daily basis. She goes live at lunchtime with a quick morning recap, and then she does a more in-depth live in the evenings, which covers the entire day. So the information that I have in this video comes from Lauren's live. There was actually a heck of a lot that was covered in that particular live stream, so I am going to go back and listen to it again later on this evening, which, if you're in America, you guys will be most of you will probably be fast asleep by then. But I just want to go over a few things that to me really stood out from what she was saying about today. For me, the big thing is, I think in the first days, probably the first 4 days of the trial, people kept asking, well, when are they going to link all this to Richard Allen? Because you had these various witnesses who spoke about seeing a particular man on the trails, and they had a timeline that they set up through these witnesses. They had descriptions that they set up through these witnesses. And of course, witnesses aren't always reliable, so there were discrepancies between the various witnesses. But you at least got the overall idea of Bridge Guy having been seen by multiple people, and a timeline having been set up for when he was seen, as well as someone having seen a car which sounds similar to Richard Allen's car. So in today's various witness testimonies, amongst them was a few really interesting ones. The first one was the lady who volunteered her time for Carroll County, helping organise files, etc. And as it turns out, it was actually her who discovered the overlooked file on Richard Allen. It had been filed under Richard Allen and then with the name of his street, not as Richard Allen as the individual, and she remembered having seen another file for Richard Allen, and so she made the connection in her head, and she brought the files to the attention of Tony Liggett, because to her they were significant enough that she wanted him to have a look at them. And it was because of her noticing that these files had been overlooked and bringing them to the attention of Tony Liggett, who he is now the sheriff, I believe. But he was previously a detective, so at the time he was a detective. And it was because of her that Richard Allen was found. And a lot of what was spoken about today focused on Richard Allen having actually approached law enforcement to say, yeah, I was on the bridge, I was in the area, and he gave a time frame, and this is important, between 1:30 and 4 o'clock. And that matches with all the witness statements. He also gives an account of passing 3 girls at a particular time at a particular location, which actually fits the witness statements given by 3 girls who say that they saw who they believe to have been Bridge Guy. So Richard Allen's own statements line up with witness statements placing him at the Monon High Bridge, and the most significant one being those girls, because it pretty much places him at the bridge just before Libby and Abby got to the bridge, because these witnesses saw him, then they saw Libby and Abby. So you have his own testimony putting himself right there. And you have witnesses not only putting him there, but in terms of a timeline, putting him there just before Libby and Abby went to the bridge. Now, I'm going to come back to talking about that towards the end of this video, because I think that was the thing that touched me the most. Tony Liggett also spoke about the enhanced audio, and the jury were read a transcript of the audio from the girls' video, and I'll come back to that at the end. Because first of all, I want to talk a little bit more about the search that was done at Richard Allen's place. I think I got the feel from listening to Lauren today that the tide is turning a bit, and that the prosecution are now starting to show where they're at in terms of why Richard Allen was arrested, and that the jury may well end up being convinced that he was responsible for the death of the girls. So, one significant thing, and when it was discussed yesterday or the day before about there being about the phone data, and they were saying that they didn't have Richard Allen's phone from 2017, one of the big questions was, because they had recovered a couple of dozen devices from Richard Allen's house. So the question was, how many phones did they recover? Because not everyone keeps their phones. I know last time I replaced my phone, I put a new screen on it, bought a new battery for it, gave it to my brother who had an older phone than that. He put it in his pocket when he headed out on his bike, and he managed to run over it and destroy it. So that phone didn't last long. But, the point is there, I didn't keep my phone. I gave it away when I got my new phone. So a lot of people do that. And of course here in Australia you can go to Aldi and they have those recycling things where you can dump your recycled batteries, and you can recycle phones in a lot of places in Australia. So it's, the question that was raised when it was said, well, they didn't find his 2017 phone was, well, is that an outlier? What other devices were kept? It turns out they recovered 15 mobile phones from Richard Allen's house. The only phone that they did not recover was his 2017 phone that he had on the day that the girls went missing. And they know the serial number, etc. of that phone because the man who actually interviewed Richard Allen in 2017 had actually made note of serial number, etc., presumably for matching up with the cell tower data. So they had that data there. And yeah, his 2017 phone is just gone. So that does not look good for him at all. And of course, if you have watched any of the recounts of witness testimony and stuff, that was a big thing yesterday because after they had finished talking about Libby's phone, they moved on to Richard Allen's phone, and the defence team had made a big point of like, well, now you've recovered Richard Allen's phones, you recovered devices from Richard Allen's place. Did any of those devices link him to the girls? Yada yada. And he really pushed that point, only to have the prosecution come back and make it clear that, well, none of those devices linked him to the girls because the one phone that was not recovered was the 2017 phone that he had the day the girls went missing. So that was definitely significant. Now, what else did they find in his house? Multiple large knives. And not just where you would expect them. Now, apparently they found them in the garage and some in the kitchen, but he also had knives in the master bedroom. Lauren describes them as being extremely large knives. And to me, that's like, why would you have knives in your master bedroom? So apparently there were over 15 large knives. The defence tried to push the idea of, well, Richard Allen goes fishing, and why wouldn't you have fishing knives, and why wouldn't you keep your old knives? I think you'll find that most people, when they have a fishing knife, when it goes blunt, they'll get it sharpened. They don't go and buy a new one and then keep the old one. Like, who does that? And then another thing that came out, which seems quite damning of Richard Allen, is like I said, there's the witness testimony saying that she saw a car which matched Richard Allen's. And they talk about having got CCTV footage, and it is of a car that matches the description of Allen's car. And the clincher, which was pointed out by Tony Liggett, was that the wheels on the car shown in the video, you can see through the rims, which is rather unique. And Richard Allen's car had those rims. So you had the very, very unique rims on Richard Allen's car. You have a car that was exactly the same type of car, caught on camera, and the rims pretty much nailed it there. I think that's going to be something that definitely convinces the jury quite a bit. Now, I'm going to move on to the transcript of the video. So, for that, rather than me, I didn't write down notes. I thought, I'm just going to play the clip from Lauren's live stream where she actually reads out what the transcript said. Because why make extra work? And also because I think hearing it from someone who was there in court and who saw the transcript, there was certainly a bit of emotion there. Listening to her reading through what the transcript said. So I think it's better to have her saying it than to have me saying it.
Let me start it over. Abby says, "Is he right here?" And then Abby states, "Don't leave me up here." Libby says, "See, there's a path." And then Libby's voice changes and she says, "That be a gun." And then Abby states, "There is no path here." And then a man states, "Down the hill."
So way back, long before any arrests were made in the case, if you followed this case from day one, you will remember Mike Paddy talking about the girls being such close friends that they wouldn't leave each other. Now, I can't remember the exact quote, and of course it's hard right now to find the older footage because you go searching in YouTube now and all the footage around Delphi is all the most recent stuff. But essentially what was said by Mike Paddy, and this was probably even in 2017, was that, you know, the girls cared about each other so much that they stayed together and they would not abandon each other. And at the time, I must admit, I thought, wow, I wonder how he knows that. Because it seemed like a very precise thing to say. And I can't remember whether it was said explicitly or whether it was just inferred that one of them could have run and escaped, but they didn't because they stayed there with their friend. So then when we have Abby saying to Libby, "Don't leave me up here," Libby has spotted a path where they could have escaped. She could have run, but her friend was still on that bridge with that man. They knew that he had a gun. And Libby made the ultimate sacrifice. She wasn't going to abandon her friend. And that to me is just so, so powerful. And I wouldn't be surprised if that's something that we hear again in the closing arguments from the prosecution, because it shows the tragedy of what happened to those girls. It shows that possibly Libby could have ran. Maybe she could have escaped, but she would never have left her best friend, which I think is just beautiful. So I'm going to leave it at that for today. Like I said, there was a heck of a lot more that was said, and I'm going to go back through that live stream because there's so much that came out, and I think if you're looking at weighing scales, the scales may have shifted in favour of the prosecution today. Obviously, this is only the first week of the trial, essentially, and it's meant to be a 4-week trial. But if this is the beginning of what prosecution have, it's not looking good for Richard Allen. So I strongly recommend that you hop over and watch Lauren's live stream because she goes into all that in depth. But thanks for listening. If you're new, please hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, and please do leave a comment below. And I'll catch you in the next one.
Abby says, "Is he right here?" And then Abby states, "Don't leave me up here." Libby says, "See, there's a path." And then Libby's voice changes and she says, "That be a gun." And then Abby states, "There is no path here." And then a man states, "Down the hill."